The rice still clings to my black dress as I pull into the trailhead parking lot, my heels clicking against the gravel in a rhythm that feels foreign after hours of forced smiles and congratulations. Sarah's wedding was beautiful, the kind of Pinterest-perfect ceremony that makes you believe in fairy tales, even when you're 25 and still sleeping on a futon in a studio apartment. I lean against my Honda, slipping off the uncomfortable shoes and wiggling my toes in the cool Oregon air. The forest stretches before me, a tapestry of amber and crimson that seems to pulse with its own quiet heartbeat. This wasn't planned. I was supposed to drive straight home, maybe stop for takeout, and spend the evening scrolling through wedding photos on social media, adding heart emojis to comments about how perfect everything looked. Instead, something pulled me here, to this trail I discovered last spring when I was running from a different kind of discomfort. The wedding reception echoes in my mind. Jessica announcing her promotion to partner at the law firm, Michael showing off photos of his new house in Portland suburbs, everyone asking when I'll settle down or figure out what I want to do with my life. The truth is, I don't know. And for the first time in months, standing here at the edge of this forest, that feels okay. I change into the hiking boots I keep in my trunk, a habit my mother calls over-prepared and I call hopeful. The parking lot empties as the sun begins its descent, leaving me alone with the whisper of wind through Douglas firs. I've always been comfortable with solitude, but today it feels different. Today it feels chosen rather than circumstantial. The wedding dress code was elegant autumn, and everyone looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine. I felt like I'd stepped out of my own life, playing a role I hadn't auditioned for. But here, changing into worn jeans and a soft sweater, I begin to remember who I am when no one's watching. The trail entrance greets me with a wooden sign weathered by countless seasons. Maple Ridge Trail, 3.2 miles. I've walked this path before, but never with this particular weight on my chest. The weight of comparison, of expectations, of wondering if I'm falling behind in some race I never signed up for. As I take my first step onto the dirt path, leaves crunch beneath my feet with a satisfying sound that drowns out the echo of wedding bells still ringing in my ears. The forest welcomes me like an old friend who doesn't ask questions. Each step carries me deeper into a world where time moves differently, measured not in deadlines or milestones, but in the gentle fall of leaves and the distant call of a woodpecker somewhere high above. I've been walking for maybe 20 minutes when I realize I'm not thinking about Sarah's wedding anymore. Instead, I'm noticing how the light filters through the canopy, creating patches of gold on the forest floor. There's something about the way autumn transforms everything, not destroying, but revealing. The trees aren't dying, they're letting go. My phone buzzes in my pocket, a text from Mom. "How was the wedding, honey? Did you catch the bouquet?" I silence it without responding. She means well, but right now I need silence more than I need to explain why I'm hiking alone instead of celebrating with the wedding party at some trendy downtown bar. The path winds upward, and my breathing deepens in the way it does when I'm finally moving my body after sitting still too long. At the reception, I felt like I was holding my breath, waiting for someone to notice that I didn't belong. Everyone else seemed to have their lives figured out, married or engaged, climbing corporate ladders, buying houses, planning futures that looked like magazine spreads. And me? I work at a nonprofit that barely pays my rent, write poetry in coffee shops on weekends, and can't remember the last time I felt passionate about a 5-year plan. Sitting at table 7, watching Sarah dance with her new husband, I wondered if there was something wrong with me for not wanting what everyone else seemed to want so desperately. But here, surrounded by trees that have been growing for decades without anyone's approval, that question feels less urgent. A maple leaf drifts down and lands on my shoulder, brilliant orange with edges of red, like a small flame. I brush it off gently and watch it join its companions on the ground. There's no shame in their falling, no sense that they've failed because they're not still clinging to branches. They're simply part of a cycle that's bigger than individual achievement or timelines or societal expectations about when certain things should happen. I pause at a wooden bridge crossing a small creek, the water moving with unhurried purpose over smooth stones. The sound is hypnotic, constant but not demanding, present but not overwhelming. This is what I've been craving without knowing it. Presence without performance, beauty without purpose beyond itself. My reflection wavers in the water below, fractured by ripples, but unmistakably me. Not the version of me that was trying so hard to fit in at the wedding, but the version that finds poetry in ordinary moments, that chooses solitude over small talk, that measures success in moments of genuine contentment rather than external markers. A flash of gray catches my peripheral vision, and I stop mid-step. A squirrel sits on a fallen log about 10 feet away, completely absorbed in examining an acorn. It turns the nut over in its tiny paws, evaluating it with the kind of focus I usually reserve for overthinking text messages or job applications. I hold perfectly still, not wanting to interrupt this small moment of pure intention. The squirrel doesn't seem concerned with my presence, or with anything beyond this single acorn, this singular moment of decision. Will this one do? Is it worth the effort to bury? Should it eat now or save for later? Without warning, it drops the acorn and scampers directly toward me, stopping just close enough that I can see the alert intelligence in its dark eyes. We regard each other for a heartbeat, two creatures sharing the same patch of forest floor, neither of us having anywhere more important to be. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the squirrel darts up the nearest tree trunk in a spiral pattern that seems choreographed by joy rather than necessity. It pauses on a high branch to chatter at me, not aggressively, but conversationally, as if sharing an opinion about the afternoon or the quality of this particular stretch of trail. I laugh out loud, the sound surprising me in the quiet woods. When was the last time I laughed spontaneously? Not the polite chuckles I offered at wedding small talk, but genuine amusement at life's simple absurdities. The squirrel's complete lack of self-consciousness strikes me as revolutionary. It didn't stop to wonder if it looked silly examining that acorn so intently. It didn't seem concerned about what other squirrels might think of its tree-climbing technique. It certainly didn't appear to be comparing its acorn-gathering progress to some imaginary timeline of squirrel achievement. I continue walking, but the encounter stays with me. There's something profound about witnessing a creature that lives entirely in the present moment, making decisions based on current needs rather than future fears or past disappointments. The squirrel didn't seem anxious about winter preparation or nostalgic about last season's abundance. It was simply here, now, evaluating one acorn with complete attention. At the wedding, I felt like I was constantly outside myself, watching myself interact, evaluating my responses, wondering how I appeared to others. But the squirrel reminded me what it feels like to be fully present in my own life, to make choices from authentic interest rather than social expectation. The trail curves around a massive cedar tree, its trunk so wide I could hide behind it completely. I place my palm against the rough bark, feeling the solid reality of something that's been growing here longer than I've been alive. It doesn't seem to care that it's not the tallest tree in the forest or that other trees might have more symmetrical branches. Standing here with my hand on this ancient trunk, I feel some of the wedding's residual anxiety begin to dissolve. Maybe the squirrel was right. Maybe the secret is to focus on one acorn at a time, one moment at a time,
one decision at a time, without the constant weight of comparison or the pressure to perform my life for an imaginary audience.
The trail begins to climb more steeply, winding between towering Douglas firs that seem to pierce the sky. My legs remember this rhythm, the steady burn of uphill hiking, the way breath and movement synchronize when you stop fighting the incline and start working with it. Each switchback reveals a new perspective, and I find myself slowing down not from fatigue but from wonder. How different everything looks from just 50 feet higher. How the spacing between trees creates entirely new sightlines, new compositions of light and shadow. This is what I've been missing in my rush to figure out my life. The understanding that perspective changes with elevation, that what looks like a problem from one vantage point might reveal itself as simply part of a larger pattern when viewed from another angle. At the wedding, everyone's life seemed to follow the same basic trajectory. College, career, marriage, house, kids. From where I sat at table 7, those seemed like the only valid markers of adulthood, the only proof of a life well lived. But up here, with the forest spreading out below in all directions, I can see how many different paths lead through the same landscape. Some trees grow straight and tall, reaching for direct sunlight. Others bend and twist around obstacles, finding their own way to the sun. Some thrive in dense groves, supporting each other through interconnected root systems. Others stand alone, claiming their own patch of earth and sky. None of them are wrong. The path curves sharply, left then right, following the natural contours of the hillside rather than forcing a direct line to the summit. There's wisdom in this meandering, the understanding that sometimes the longest way is the strongest way, that switchbacks allow us to climb heights that would be impossible to scale directly. I've been treating my life like it should be a straight line from point A to point B, frustrated by every detour, every pause, every change of direction. But watching how this trail navigates the mountain, I'm beginning to see my own wandering differently. Maybe my uncertainty isn't a sign of being lost. Maybe it's a sign of being willing to find the path that actually fits my particular landscape. A chipmunk darts across the trail ahead of me, cheeks bulging with seeds. It doesn't pause to apologize for not being a squirrel or worry that it's not collecting nuts fast enough compared to its neighbors. It's simply being a chipmunk, following chipmunk instincts, living a chipmunk life with complete commitment. When did I stop trusting my own instincts? When did I start measuring my progress against everyone else's timeline instead of my own internal compass? The wedding made me feel like I was falling behind. But behind what exactly? A race I never consciously entered? The afternoon light is changing, becoming more golden, more horizontal. Soon it will be that magic hour when everything looks like it's lit from within. I've always been drawn to these transitional times. Dawn, dusk, the moments between seasons when transformation becomes visible. Maybe that's what I am right now. Not behind or ahead, but in transition. Not failing to achieve someone else's version of success, but in the process of discovering what success means to me. The path beneath my feet continues to wind upward, and I trust it to take me where I need to go. The higher I climb, the more the forest changes around me. The undergrowth thins, and the spaces between trees become cathedral-like, vast and hushed, filled with the kind of silence that feels sacred rather than empty. Even my footsteps seem muted here, absorbed by decades of fallen needles that carpet the forest floor in russet and gold. I paused beside a massive old-growth fir, its trunk scarred by decades of storms, but still reaching skyward with quiet dignity. The tree doesn't seem concerned with how quickly it grew compared to its neighbors, or whether it achieved the proper height by a certain age. It simply is, rooted, present,
authentic in its being. This is the silence I've been seeking without knowing it. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of peace. The wedding reception was full of noise, conversations about achievements, plans, acquisitions. But underneath all that chatter was a deeper silence, an absence of genuine connection, of real listening, of being truly seen. Here, in the cathedral quiet of the forest, I can finally hear my own thoughts without the static of comparison. For months, I've been drowning in everyone else's expectations, everyone else's definitions of what my life should look like by now. But in this silence, those voices fade to whispers, then disappear entirely. A gentle breeze moves through the canopy high above, creating a sound like whispered prayers or distant conversations in a language I almost understand. The trees know something about patience that I'm just beginning to learn, that growth happens in its own time, that there's no rushing the essential processes, that trying to force blooms before their season leads only to artificial flowers that fool no one, least of all yourself. I sit on a moss-covered boulder and pull out my water bottle, not because I'm particularly thirsty, but because it feels right to pause, to be still, to let the forest work whatever quiet magic it offers to those willing to receive it. The water tastes like clarity, like possibility, like the first drink after a long fever has finally broken. From this vantage point, I can see patches of the valley below through gaps in the trees. Somewhere down there, the wedding reception is probably winding down. Sarah and her new husband are likely cutting the cake, posing for photos, beginning their officially sanctioned journey into the future everyone expects them to want. I feel no resentment toward their happiness, no bitterness about their certainty, but I also feel no longing to trade places, no sense that I'm missing something essential. Their path is beautiful for them, but it's their path, not mine. The silence here doesn't judge or compare or demand explanation. It simply holds space for whatever is true in this moment. And what's true for me right now is that I don't need to know where I'm going to trust that I'm exactly where I need to be. A single leaf drifts down from somewhere far above, spinning in lazy spirals before coming to rest on my knee. Perfect in its imperfection, beautiful in its willingness to let go, complete in its surrender to gravity and grace. The trail levels out into a small clearing where someone, probably the Forest Service, maybe just a thoughtful hiker, has positioned a weathered log as an impromptu bench. It faces west, perfectly positioned to catch the last light of the day as the sun begins its descent toward the horizon. I settle onto the log, feeling how it's been worn smooth by countless other visitors who also needed a place to pause, to think, to simply be. The wood is still warm from the afternoon sun, and I can smell the faint vanilla scent of old pine mixing with the sharper notes of autumn leaves and forest loam. This is what I came here for, though I couldn't have articulated it when I left the wedding parking lot. Not answers exactly, but this feeling of rightness, of being aligned with myself in a way that has nothing to do with external validation or societal timelines. The valley spreads out below me, a patchwork of forest and meadow painted in every shade of gold and amber the season offers. Somewhere in the distance, I can see the thin line of a river catching the late light, and beyond that, the suggestion of mountains fading into blue-gray silhouettes. My phone has been silent for the past hour. No texts asking where I am, no social media notifications, no reminders of deadlines or obligations. Just me and this moment and the growing understanding that I don't need to apologize for the pace of my own life. At 25, I thought I should have more figured out. I thought I should want the things my friends want, should be working toward the milestones they've already achieved. But sitting here in the fading light, I realized that should is just another word for other people's expectations wearing the costume of wisdom. A hawk circles high above, riding thermals with the kind of effortless grace that comes from perfect alignment with natural forces. It doesn't struggle against the wind or apologize for not being an eagle. It simply is what it is, where it is, riding the currents that are available in this moment. I think about the poem I started writing last month, the one about finding beauty in abandoned places. I stopped working on it because it seemed frivolous, not practical enough for someone who should be focused on building a real career. But maybe that poem is exactly what I need to be writing. Maybe my tendency to find meaning in quiet moments isn't a character flaw, but a gift. The sun touches the horizon, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold that would make a wedding planner weep with envy. But this sunset belongs to no one and everyone, costs nothing, and gives everything. Asks for no commitment beyond the willingness to witness its brief and perfect beauty. I don't need to be Sarah, don't need to want her life or anyone else's life. I need to be Leela. Leela, who finds poetry in forest clearings, who chooses solitude over small talk, who measures wealth in moments like this, rather than in bank accounts or wedding registries. The light continues to fade, and soon I'll need to head back down the trail, to my car, back to my studio apartment, back to the life that looks unimpressive on paper, but feels increasingly like home. For now, though, I'm content to sit on this log and watch the day end, feeling finally, completely, authentically myself. And that, I realize, is enough. More than enough. It's everything.